The moon hangs high over the quiet port town. A soft tune drifts on the night air from someone nearby. On the docks, a lone man in a cloak listens to the sound. His ear twitches as he registers another much closer noise. He looks down and sees something small and golden gleaming on the stone near his feet. Bending down, his fingers close around an ornate locket engraved with a flower. He stands straight again, the weight of it unfamiliar in his hand. He opens it to find a small mirror and a simple, loving inscription. The memory of finding it floods back, the locket's glint catching his glowing eye. Then a hand on his shoulder pulls him from the memory and into the morning. He wakes in a sunlit bed, the locket now resting on a chain around his neck. A woman in a pink gown is already up and sitting at the edge of his bed. He reaches for her hand, bringing her knuckles to his lips for a gentle kiss. Her eyes soften as she looks down at his affectionate gesture. Then her gaze catches on the new piece of jewelry resting against his skin. She playfully questions where the necklace came from. He just smiles, holding the locket up for her to see more clearly. He claims it is merely a charm to ward off bad luck, a story he has prepared. She reminds him of his last charm, a simple coin he used to carry. She then moves away from the bed, her curiosity finally getting the better of her. He leans back against the pillows with a smirk, explaining that he simply does not wish to die. She turns away, dismissing his simple explanation as if it is not enough. Her playful mood then vanishes as she lunges back onto the bed, demanding he give the locket to her. He looks up in surprise as she presses a hand to his forehead, questioning why she would want such a shabby thing. Her condescending tone returns as she tells him he talks too much for a mercenary. She then snatches the chain from his neck, declaring that if she wants it, he will hand it over. Sitting back on the canopied bed, she finally asks the real question burning in her mind about whether another woman gave it to him. His patience finally snaps as he mutters under his breath about how annoying she has become. In a swift motion, he shoves her away from him, sending her stumbling back with a cry. Now standing, he glares down at her as she shouts from the floor, furious at the audacity of a lowly mercenary. He calmly wraps a sheet around his waist, retorting that she seemed to enjoy that same mercenary just fine. With a final dismissive look over his shoulder, he reminds her that a few nights together do not mean he belongs to her. Soon after, he is out in the bright morning sun of the bustling town. Nearby, two women gossip about the recent capture of a murder suspect from the docks. One of them suddenly stops mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she spots someone approaching. Her friend follows her gaze across the bridge, where she recognizes the famous mercenary passing by. It is Leopold Gregory, looking confident and well known for both his skill and his charm. He strolls down the street, drawing the admiration of women and the envy of men. Yet despite the attention, Leopold seems lost in his own world, a serene look on his face. His peaceful moment is shattered when someone shouts his full name, his eyes snapping towards the sound. The voice belongs to a man in a dark coat at the far end of the street, who declares he has finally found him. He is not alone, but backed by a squad of uniformed police officers who had assumed Leopold had already fled. With a curt command from their mustachioed leader, the squad is ordered to move in. At his word, the officers surge forward to apprehend the mercenary. Leopold remains perfectly still, watching their approach without a hint of fear. His expression is one of utter boredom, his strange eyes beginning to glow with a faint light. The first officer to reach him is met with a swift, brutal punch to the jaw. The impact sends the man's head snapping back, a spray of spittle flying from his lips. His body is thrown backward by the sheer force of the blow. He crashes to the ground, completely incapacitated by the single strike. Leopold lets out a weary sigh, standing over the fallen man as the other officers hesitate. His glowing eyes narrow as he finally asks who they are. The lead officer simply adjusts his black leather gloves, unfazed by the display of strength. He admits that he never expected Leopold to come along quietly. Deciding to dispense with the pleasantries, he holds up a hand to get straight to the point. He formally places Leopold under arrest as a suspect in the dockside murder case. Leopold looks down with an audible click of his tongue, a sound of pure annoyance. His reaction only seems to amuse the officer, who lets out a quiet chuckle. But then Leopold begins to laugh as well, bending over as if he has just heard the funniest joke in the world. He straightens up with a smirk, questioning why the officer would bother him now that he has washed his hands of that life. He adds that the docks are far too good a place for such dirty work. His gaze then drifts past the officer, a flicker of something unreadable in his glowing eye. The officer interrupts his thoughts, holding up a sketch of a well-dressed man and asking if he knows him. He presses further, questioning if Leopold saw this particular man at the port. Leopold turns away with a dismissive smile, claiming he does not remember men's faces. The officer lets out a short, humorless laugh at the predictable deflection. He admits it was foolish of him to expect a straight answer. With a sharp click of his tongue, the officer's patience finally runs out. He lunges forward, his hand reaching for his weapon, but his face contorts in shock as Leopold moves first. The mercenary launches himself into the air, a blur of motion aimed directly at him. A powerful kick connects with the officer's jaw, sending him reeling back. The sudden violence sends the crowd into a panicked murmur. A man in the crowd recognizes him as the murder suspect from the docks. Before Leopold can act again, a rope snaps tight around his neck from behind. He is yanked backward, his hands flying to his throat as he gasps for air. His eyes widen in pained surprise at the sudden capture. An officer shouts in triumph as Leopold is slammed face first onto the ground. The rest of the squad immediately swarms his prone form, batons raised to subdue him. The lead officer, now recovered, crosses his arms and watches the brutal arrest with grim satisfaction. He lies sprawled on the hard ground, the world a painful ringing blur. The lead officer looms over him, suggesting that now they can finally have a proper talk. He presents the image of the victim again, identifying him as Harid Bicardi, head of a trading company. This man's body, he explains, was discovered down at the very docks Leopold frequents. But even with his face pressed to the dirt, Leopold's glowing eye glares up defiantly as he asks what that has to do with him. One of the other officers shoves his head down in response to the disrespect. The leader then crouches beside him, bringing himself down to the mercenary's level. His gloved fingers find the golden locket, noting that the victim was always wearing a particular piece of jewelry. He holds it up before Leopold's wide eye, revealing that this very locket was missing when the body was found. A bead of sweat rolls down his temple as Leopold weakly claims he just picked it up on the street. The officer scoffs at the obvious lie, yanking the chain tight around Leopold's neck. He tightens his grip, adding that a witness also saw Leopold at the docks on the day of the murder. With a sneer, he remarks that Leopold's striking looks make him far too easy to remember. Leopold gasps for air as the officer calls him by his full name, Leopold Gregory. His eye widens as he is then formally placed under arrest for the murder. The world finally goes dark as the pain and lack of air overwhelm him. He comes to with a groan, realizing he must have blacked out while being led away in cuffs. Trudging along, he thinks grimly of the fortune teller's charm that was meant to ward off this exact kind of bad luck. His morose thoughts are suddenly interrupted by the sound of frantic approaching hooves. A herd of goats stampedes down the path, throwing the entire procession into chaos. Amid the confusion, a slow smile spreads across Leopold's lips. He seizes the opportunity, twisting away from his distracted captors. With a grunt, he slams his shoulder hard into the nearest officer. Another guard is sent flying by a powerful kick as Leopold breaks free. He is already a blur in the distance as the lead officer shouts for his men to pursue. The mustachioed man vows furiously that they will catch the fugitive again, no matter what it takes. Leopold's feet pound against the dirt path as he sprints away from the town. The officers give chase, their boots thundering behind him as they order him to stop. He runs toward the edge of the cliffs, overlooking the sea with nowhere left to go. Glancing back, he scoffs at their shouts that running is futile. His expression hardens with resolve as he stares down at the long drop before him. With the officers closing in behind him, he makes a desperate choice. He leaps from the cliff's edge, plummeting into the mist below with a silent vow not to die this way. As he falls, a memory surfaces of two children lying in the grass watching a wishing star. His little sister had pointed up at the sky, laughing at a story he once told her. She had pretended to be furious when he called it a lie, but he just laughed and asked what she wished for. She had looked at him with wide, serious eyes, insisting she had already told him. He had teased her, playfully asking if she really had. The memory of her small voice calling him brother echoes in his mind. Her question from long ago pulls at him now. How long was he going to stay lying down? His glowing eye snaps open, pulling him back from the depths of memory and the cold sea. The first thing he sees is a small child with a bird on its head, asking what he is looking at. Lying in a soft bed, he blinks in confusion at the strange sight before him. The child then toddles away through a sunlit doorway, revealing a clean and warm home. His mind struggles to accept this peaceful reality after the violent chase. He takes in the simple wooden room, wondering if he somehow died and ended up in heaven. A sharp pain in his side quickly dismisses that thought, reminding him he is very much alive. Looking down, he discovers his torso is tightly wrapped in fresh bandages. His gaze then lifts toward the sound of someone entering the room. A woman in a dark dress steps through the doorway, bathed in the morning light. She carries a vase of bright yellow flowers, her expression serene as she approaches. He watches her, his glowing eye filled with cautious wonder. For a moment, he considers that she might be an angel after all. She turns to him with a gentle expression, noticing that he is finally awake. She explains that he collapsed right in her flower bed, crushing the plants she worked so hard to grow. He tries to sit up straighter but flinches as a sharp pain shoots through his bandaged ribs. The woman's calm voice cuts through his discomfort as she offers him something. He looks up to see her holding out the golden locket, explaining it was found beside him. His hand reaches out slowly, his gaze fixed on the object that has caused him so much trouble. His fingers close around the familiar cool metal as she places it carefully in his palm. He looks up at her, a strange sense of familiarity stirring within him. She assures him that she did not open it, a comment that catches him off guard. He glances down at the necklace, murmuring that its contents are all that matter to him. With a soft click of his thumb, he opens the locket to reveal the portrait inside. His lips press into a thin, somber line as he stares at the face in the picture. The woman mistakes his silence for recovery, deciding his time here is over. She instructs instructs him to leave at once, turning her back to him. He calls out suddenly, his voice sharp with urgency. In a blur of motion, he lunges from the bed and grabs her arm. The force of his grip yanks her backward, her eyes widening as the vase slips from her grasp. It crashes against the wooden floor, shattering into pieces. She lands hard with a soft groan, surrounded by the scattered yellow flowers. His momentum pulls her down with him, her body landing softly against his bare chest. Lying beneath her, he stares up into her startled face. His glowing eye seems to bore into her, searching her expression for an answer. Their faces are mere inches apart, their breaths mingling in the sudden silence. She looks down at him, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. He continues to hold her gaze, his expression unblinking and intense. Her hand rises slowly, her fingers gently touching the side of his neck. The open locket lies on the bedside table, framing her in the distance as he wonders why she feels so familiar. Within the locket is a portrait of the very same woman, her likeness captured beside a scratched inscription of love. His mind drifts to a memory, not his own, of a lone wagon rattling across a desolate moonlit plain. Its wooden wheels bump and creak along the uneven dirt path. In the back, a mound of hay shifts with every jolt of the journey. A man lies hidden amongst the straw, feverish and weak. He peers out into the darkness, murmuring that his fever feels like a dawn that will never break. He considers himself lucky to have found passage, but a deep uncertainty about his future clouds his thoughts. The man glances up at the sky, annoyed by the brightness of the full moon. His hand clutches a golden chain at his neck, a desperate certainty guiding his actions. The memory then shifts, replaced by the image of goats stampeding through a field. He recalls how that same golden trinket seemed to conjure the chaos that allowed his own escape. Back in the present, he silently pleads for the locket to save him just one more time. The rush of memories finally subsides, leaving only the quiet of the room. His awareness returns to the woman's hand, now resting gently against his cheek. He connects her face to the portrait in the dead man's locket, the impossible truth settling in. Whatever the explanation, he knows his fate is now inextricably tied to this woman. Her voice cuts through his racing thoughts as she asks him to move aside. A sly smile touches his lips as he replies that he would not dare lay a hand on the person who saved him. His glowing eye glints as a new thought takes shape in his mind. He looks up at her from the floor, his tone changing as he asks if there is something she wants from him. With a suggestive smirk, he offers to repay the debt of his life in any way she might desire. His suggestive words are met with a sharp, stinging slap across the face. Her heeled shoe then presses down hard against the fresh bandages on his chest. She looks down at him with cold disdain, remarking on his vulgar tongue. His eye widens as she identifies herself as the lady of a noble house, a fact his mind struggles to accept. With her foot still pinning him, she states that he should be punished for such an insult. He scrambles backward in a panic, desperately trying to retract his poorly chosen words. His mind races with confusion, wondering why a noblewoman would ever live in such a simple home. The harsh reality of his situation crashes down on him, knowing that to be thrown out now is a death sentence. He slumps against the wall in defeat, muttering that she should have just let him die on the cliffside. The woman watches him from the side, her expression unreadable as she considers his desperate state. In a sudden shift, he throws himself forward into a low bow, begging for her forgiveness. He explains his grave mistake, all while thinking that he must find a way to hold on and survive. Lifting his head slightly, he begins to spin a tale of a terrible accident that cost him everything. He looks up at her with pleading eyes, finishing his story by declaring her his savior. Kneeling before her in the sunlit room, he offers to repay the kindness she has shown him. He presses his case further, promising to do anything she asks if she will only give him a chance. With a final desperate plea, he looks up and asks her to hire him. He lays his life at her feet, insisting that she is the only one who can keep him alive. She stands in silence for a long moment, her profile turned away as she weighs his words. A man's voice suddenly calls out her name, Jean, interrupting the tense standoff. A large, bearded man steps through the doorway, asking what she needs. Without turning, she gives a cold command to get the kneeling man out of her sight. The man's expression grows grim as he asks if she means from the estate or from the world entirely. His plea for work echoes mockingly in his mind as he is led away. Sometime later, he stands dazed under a bright blue sky, wondering where he has ended up. He finds himself on a lush garden path leading away from the small house. The bearded man stomps toward him, reminding him that only the madam's mercy is keeping him alive. His mind drifts back to the night he was found, when that same man called out to his mistress with a lantern. He remembers the man finding his collapsed body in the dark and suggesting he be thrown out. But Jean had intervened, insisting they tend to his severe wounds in the nearby hut. She had resolved to send him away after he healed, unable to bear seeing another person die. Now the man leads him toward a grand mansion in the distance, explaining that she recently became a widow. He learns the shocking truth that the head of the Bicardi family was murdered. The victim's name was Harid Bicardi, the very man whose portrait is in the locket. A memory surfaces of the officers who chased him, standing over a body found at the docks. He murmurs aloud, realizing Jean is the woman from the locket. His careless words earn him a furious rebuke from the bearded man for his disrespect. The man clarifies that she is the wife of the late Master Bicardi and the lady of the entire estate. His guardian's eyes narrow, noting that he is clearly not from around here. He then looks at him with deep mistrust, demanding to know what he truly is. His guardian's intense questioning is suddenly interrupted by a man's voice shouting for Jean from the mansion. A well-dressed butler approaches, complaining aloud about unchecked supplies. His eyes land on the stranger with a curious stare, but the bearded man dismisses his presence. The butler Christopher is then instructed to show him to the back gate. He casts a sideways glance, his glowing eye filled with skepticism. As the bearded man walks away, he delivers one final ominous warning. His eyes seem to flash as he promises a real death if he is ever seen here again. While being led away, he realizes he is on the estate of the very merchant he is accused of murdering. He turns his head, a troubling thought taking shape in his mind. His memory drifts to the moment Jean's fingers touched the golden locket. It seems impossible that she would not recognize something her own husband treasured so much. She had not opened it, and it appeared she had not even seen the suspect's sketch. The whole situation feels incredibly suspicious, as if information is being deliberately withheld from her. He runs a hand through his hair in agitation, glancing back at another servant walking past. The constant, unnerving stare from his escort puts him on edge. His tension is noticed by Christopher, who makes a quiet observation. The butler then remarks that the madam possesses a sharp sort of charm. He looks up as Christopher warns him to stay away from the widow, citing dark rumors about her. Leaning in, Christopher whispers that everyone close to Jean has ended up dead. He adds that with murder involved, she has a reputation for being twisted and creepy. He considers the butler's words, thinking that if even the servants speak so freely, the state of the household is obvious. His glowing eye narrows as he contemplates the opportunity this chaos presents. The image of the widow now alone with an entire ownerless estate comes to his mind. A new plan begins to form as he gazes at the distant mansion. He turns back with a look of grim determination, deciding to stay and uncover who framed him for murder. That night, under the light of a full moon, he puts his new plan into motion. He discovers a wagon being loaded with stolen wine, its contents promising a hefty profit for the thieves. From the shadows, he overhears two cloaked figures discussing their illicit activities. One of the men smirks, confident that their lady is too distracted to notice the theft. Unseen in the branches of a tree above, he listens as they mock their mistress' naivety. His quiet call for their attention makes both men jump in surprise. He then leaps from his perch, descending upon the unsuspecting thieves. His body crashes onto the roof of the covered wagon, sending one of the men sprawling to the ground in terror. He lands gracefully atop the cart, staring down at the panicked men below. The thief's eyes widen in shocked recognition as he realizes who has caught them. Stepping down from the wagon, he remarks on the thoroughness of their crime. A wry smile plays on his lips as he recalls his old life dealing with petty criminals. His expression hardens, his glowing eye flaring with a sudden intensity. In response, one of the thieves scrambles to his feet and grabs a heavy brick from the ground. The man brandishes the makeshift weapon, daring him to continue his threats. He simply turns his head, his glowing eye fixed on the man as he asks if he is done. The thief's bravado shatters instantly, and he begins to plead for mercy, offering anything in exchange for his life. He leans in close, a dark smile playing on his lips as he asks if the man truly means it. A thoughtful expression crosses his face, his glowing eye glinting as he mulls over the possibilities. His attention then drifts down to the dark bow tie fastened at the thief's throat. He brings a hand to his own chin, a sly grin spreading across his face as he asks to try it on. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Jean wanders through her quiet moonlit chambers. She sinks onto the edge of her bed, letting out a long, weary sigh. Her expression is clouded with a somber melancholy, her thoughts turning inward. The memory of the stranger's defiant, glowing eye flashes through her mind. She recalls the cold disdain in her own eyes as she looked down upon him. The feeling of his bandaged chest beneath her hand lingers for a moment. Her eyes narrow slightly as the unsettling encounter replays in her head. A sudden, furious shout from the butler Christopher yanks her from her reverie. His voice echoes from the main hall, demanding justice for being beaten. From the top of the grand staircase, she sees the source of the commotion. The stranger sitting calmly on the floor amidst her frantic staff. The servants fall silent and bow their heads as they finally notice her presence. A maid rushes to explain, claiming the man barged in with wild accusations against the butler. Jean's eyes widen in recognition as she realizes who the intruder is. He simply smirks from the floor, coolly offering to reveal all the stolen goods. The thief he captured points a trembling finger, spinning a false story of being an innocent victim. He shouts that the stranger is a fool for daring to cause trouble in the Bicardi estate. The man's confidence never wavers as he challenges them to prove who is truly lying. As the thief erupts in panic denial, Jean's quiet voice cuts through the argument. She stares ahead, her profile set with a look of firm resolution. With a resigned sigh, she accepts the blame for the chaos that has unfolded. Her unexpected admission leaves the butler sputtering in disbelief. She addresses Christopher Christopher directly, his face draining of color as she recounts his hiring. From the top of the stairs, she announces that his employment will end today. He cries out in protest, demanding to know why she believes the stranger over him. Her voice cuts through his pleas as she reveals she has known about his thieving for some time. She then turns her back on him, calling for the head servant, Mr. Brooke. With a cool glance over her shoulder, she gives the order to dismiss him. Christopher screams out, desperately proclaiming his innocence. She pays him no mind, beginning her ascent up the staircase as he tries to downplay his crimes. Her back remains turned as his pathetic excuses fade behind her. Just as Mr. Brooke grabs the struggling butler, her sharp command silences the hall. Her lips press into a thin, unyielding line, signaling the end of the discussion. While being dragged away, Christopher hurls one last venomous question about her relationship with the stranger. The accusation makes her pause, her head turning slightly in response. He continues his tirade, claiming he saw the man sneaking from her garden that morning. The stranger merely smirks from the floor, acknowledging that he is indeed a troublemaker. Then Jean's own voice rings out, offering an unbelievable explanation. She announces to the entire staff that the man saved her life. He looks up, his glowing eye widening in genuine surprise at her claim. Despite her defense, she then turns to her guards and coldly orders them to throw him out. As he is dragged away, Christopher unleashes a torrent of accusations against her. His vicious words about her past ring through the hall, yet her expression remains perfectly still. A tiny bitter smirk plays on her lips as he screams that her husband's death was her fault. The disgraced butler continues to struggle, desperately clinging to his own fallen noble status. She looks down with an icy calm and gives a new order to beat him and ensure he never returns. His face contorts with rage and disbelief at her final dismissive command. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, he wrenches himself free from the guard's hold. He snatches a heavy wine bottle from a nearby table, his eyes wild with desperation. In a final act of madness, he hurls the bottle directly up the grand staircase. Jean stands frozen on the landing, her eyes wide as the projectile flies toward her. A figure suddenly moves in front of her, shielding her from the imminent impact. As the guards finally tackle the screaming butler to the floor, the sound of shattering glass echoes through the hall. The stranger stands before her, his back stained purple with wine, and remarks that it was a close call. She looks up at the man who just saved her, her eyes filled with stunned silence. He asks if she is all right, but she can only stare, her mind reeling from the sudden violence. The chaos of the moment slowly fades into the quiet stillness of the night. Later, Jean walks through her vast and empty bedchamber, the moonlight casting long shadows. A maid enters to apologize for the earlier disturbance, but she waves it off, her thoughts elsewhere. She sits on the edge of her bed, her back to the servant, relieved that the commotion did not wake the child. Running a hand through her braids, she reflects on how overwhelming everything has become since Harid's death. The maid turns to her with a shocked expression, asking if she knew about the butler's thievery all along. Jean simply looks down, dismissing the question as a lie. She then explains that Christopher was a thorn in her side with far too many suspicious habits. In her mind, however, she admits the stranger just gave her the perfect reason to finally act. The maid bows, praising her lady's impressive ability to read people so well. She then asks if Jean is truly considering hiring that man. Jean remains silent for a long moment, lost in thought. Her mind flashes back to the stranger calling out to her as she turned to leave. He had reminded her of her own words from earlier. His eyes met hers as he brought up her declaration that he saved her life. Leaning against the railing with a confident smile, he asked for the chance to earn his reward. His hopeful gaze was met by her simple command to let him stay. Back in the present, she confirms her decision to keep him close for observation. The maid argues against it, pointing out he is a rough man and not from their town. Jean finds his sudden shifts in behavior amusing. She recalls how he acts pitiful to stir sympathy, yet his glowing eye always reveals a flicker of something more. That shameless look in his shining eyes gives his true nature away. She closes her eyes, considering another more personal reason. Besides, she is no stranger to holding a blade in the dark herself, and looking back on where it started, she admits that he truly did save her own wretched life. The thought brings with it a bitter memory of her father, a man who saw himself as the most miserable in the world. He had lost his wife in childbirth, leaving him with a daughter he never wanted. In his cruel words, she was nothing more than a worthless rat. His hatred had hollowed her out, leaving her feeling completely without purpose. The familiar nightmare makes her eyes snap open in the darkness of her room. Moonlight streams past the ornate paneling of her chamber walls. With a long sigh, she sits up in her large, empty bed. A cold sweat clings to her skin as she clutches at the collar of her nightgown. Her hand moves to her neck, tracing the source of a phantom ache. She sits bolt upright, shaken by the vividness of the dream. Then a different memory surfaces, and a kind voice calls her true name. It is her husband's voice, his gentle touch asking if Shed had another nightmare. She recalls her flustered apology, trying to leave so he could rest. His refusal always left her stunned. He would simply pull her into his arms, promising his embrace would chase the bad dreams away. The memory of his warmth only makes his absence more painful, and she covers her her face to cry. A ragged sigh escapes her lips, the old scars on her neck a testament to her past. Every time she wakes from that nightmare, the feeling is the same. An overwhelming wave of guilt crashes over her. She stands before the window, a lonely figure staring out into the vast, unforgiving night. The memory surfaces of a desperate night, her hands trembling as she clutches a cold dagger. It began with a maid's frantic cry echoing through the manor with terrible news about the master. Her younger self could only stare back, the word what catching in her throat. The world then blurred into the cold, cavernous silence of a grand church. She stood before his coffin, a veiled pariah, enduring the hateful whispers of the crowd. They called her heartless, the woman who brought ruin, and shed not a single tear. But beneath the veil, a lone tear of profound grief betrayed her stoic facade. Later that same night, she walked through the gardens toward a secluded cottage seeking an end. The ornate dagger she carried slips from her trembling hand, falling softly into the grass. Yet the cruelest rumor of all echoes in her mind, strengthening her resolve. A kinder memory fights back of her husband's voice, chasing away a different kind of nightmare. He would hold her close, his gentle words a shield against the darkness that haunted her sleep. But he is gone now, and in the memory she stands with the dagger once more in her hand. With tragic purpose, she raises the cold steel blade. His name is a final broken whisper on her lips. The weight of her sorrow is a physical force crushing her down. She turns her head one last time, her expression set with grim finality. Suddenly, the sound of a boot landing on the nearby stone bridge breaks the silence. A man stands there, his back to the starry sky, looking right at her. His voice cuts through the night, a desperate plea for her not to go. Her eyes widen at the man who has stumbled upon her darkest moment. He suddenly collapses near a flowering tree, his strength gone. From the ground, he weakly whispers her true name. His voice is a strained murmur as he begs her not to go. The memory of that desperate plea makes her lips part in the present. She is pulled back from the past, a lonely figure standing at her window once more. Elsewhere, the man himself awakens with a pained grunt, his own memories stirring. He surveys his meager new lodgings, questioning if this is really the best she can do. A sharp retort from a servant had made it clear he should take what he was given. With a sigh, he pulls off his shirt, the sticky reek of wine clinging to the fabric. He holds the stained garment, a faint smile playing on his lips as he exhales. Turning away, he sits down on a pile of wood, humming a quiet tune to himself. He then pulls out an ornate silver locket, studying its floral design. Lying back, he dangles the keepsake above him, musing that a challenge is more fun. A satisfied grin spreads across his face, pleased that he at least avoided being kicked out. His mind drifts back to her words on the staircase earlier that evening. He recalls their tense exchange, how he gambled on her declaration to ask for a job. Now lying in the dusty storehouse, he figures this must mean she plans to hire him. He props himself up on an elbow, still pondering her exact meaning. Her public announcement echoes in his thoughts, leaving him to wonder how he supposedly saved her life. He lies back on the woodpile, wondering if she mistook him for someone, or if this is all part of a larger plan. A sudden realization makes him sit bolt upright with a gasp. Gazing at the locket, he becomes convinced that she truly intends to let him live. He stretches his arms wide, a triumphant thought echoing in his mind. A shiver runs through him as he considers his luck, thinking a simple country estate will be easy to handle. He looks back with a grin, believing this might be his chance to finally leave the mercenary life behind. His eyes narrow with resolve, vowing that he will not die so easily. His quiet contemplation is broken by the early morning light filtering into the storehouse. A sudden splash of cold water shocks him awake. He sputters and coughs on the ground as a large bearded man glares down at him. The man scolds him for sleeping so late, leaving him dazed and clutching his chest. Wiping the water from his face, he can only manage a confused question. The man's bellowing command to get up rings through the small building. Pointing an accusatory finger, the servant calls him a useless idiot for daring to rest. He rises to his full height, his playful demeanor gone, as he looks down with a chilling question. The servant freezes in shock, completely taken aback by the sudden menacing change. In a flash of movement, he grabs the larger man and heaves him over his shoulder. He sends the man flying through the air with effortless strength. As the servant crashes to the ground, he looks up from a low crouch with a chilling warning. The bearded man can only stare back, his face a mask of pure terror. He turns from the terrified servant, stepping out of the dim building into the blinding sun. The sheer vastness of the estate's orchards stretches out before him, leaving him completely disoriented. He blinks in the bright light, taking in the bustling activity of the estate workers. Before long, he is put to work himself, his hands gripping the rough wood of a heavy pole. Sweat already beads on his skin as he lets out a sharp, strained breath. With a great roar of effort, he throws his entire body into the grueling task. The massive grindstone barely budges its immense weight, drawing a complaint from his lips. His grumbling is immediately met by the bearded servant's sharp, demeaning shout. The man stands back and yells, berating him for his slow pace. He glances back over his shoulder, his glowing eyes filled with simmering resentment for his new tormentor. The verbal assault then turns physical as the servant's boot connects squarely with his side. Other workers watch from a distance, remarking on the constant constant fighting between the two men. A grimace twists his lips as he realizes the old man is trying to drive him out, but the servant's next command leaves him utterly speechless with disbelief. He stares out at the vast olive groves, unable to comprehend the order to harvest them all by himself. The bearded man simply stands with his hands on his hips, taunting him with a smug grin. He then scoffs at the stranger, spitting insults about his low-born status. The word echoes in his mind as the servant continues to mock how he begged for the job. With a sneer, the man tosses a long harvesting pole onto the ground before him. He looks up in surprise as the wooden pole lands with a thud at his feet. The instructions are simple and cruel: to knock down every last olive from the branches. His new boss then points toward the horizon, demanding the impossible task be completed today. A dry chuckle escapes him as he looks back with a wry smile, finding the whole situation absurd. He turns away, his voice rising in disbelief as he gestures toward the endless rows of trees. The bearded man's cruel laughter is the only answer to his desperate question. He then offers a simple, cold ultimatum, telling him to leave if the work is too much. But pride flares in his glowing eyes, and he turns back with a challenging grin. Once the servant is gone, however, the bravado fades, leaving him alone with the impossible scale of the orchard. He stands under the hot sun, grimly weighing his two options for a slow death. His dark thoughts are interrupted by the distant chatter of other workers. A young woman carrying a bucket pauses, her gaze fixed on the solitary man in the grove. She turns to her companion, excitedly sharing the rumor that he has been assigned all the farm work. Her friend can only guess he angered their supervisor, but the first woman seems to have another idea. She turns to her friend, a new thought beginning to form on her lips. Suddenly, he is right beside her, his charming voice startling her with a strange request. His disarming smile makes her agree immediately, her mind going completely blank. She quickly hands over the large sheets he asked for. The two women are left blushing, completely captivated by the mysterious stranger. He takes the borrowed sheets and begins spreading them carefully on the ground under the trees. Wiping a bead of sweat from his brow, he takes a brief moment after finishing his preparations. He stands back to look at the white canvas. He has laid out a confident look on his face. With his plan in place, he grips the long wooden pole with renewed determination. He thrusts the pole into the high branches, shaking loose a meager shower of olives. His glowing eyes narrow with frustration as he realizes this method is far too slow. He lets the useless pole clatter from his hand. Instead, he plants his feet and wraps his powerful arms around the tree's trunk. With a grunt of pure effort, he shakes the entire tree, sending olives raining down. He looks up with a satisfied smirk as the fruit pelts the ground around him. In moments, the white sheet is completely buried under a mountain of olives. He gathers the corners of the heavy sheet, determined to see this through. Hoisting a full basket, he steels himself with the thought that he absolutely cannot get kicked out. He works without stopping until the sun finally begins to set over the vast, now harvested orchard. The bearded servant returns later that evening, certain the lazy stranger has already run off. His eyes then widen in utter shock at what he finds. The shirtless man stands waiting for him, surrounded by dozens of perfectly filled baskets. The servant's mind reels, knowing this task should take 6 strong men a full day to complete. Yet this one stranger with no background has somehow done it all by himself. The man offers a confident smirk, certain he can no longer be thrown out. But his confidence is quickly shattered as he is put to work on the grindstone, the servant screaming at him to move faster. From there, he is sent to chop wood, his every swing met with insults about his uselessness. The old man's cruelty even extends to the estate's donkey. He is then forced to carry the delicate animal across a stream on his own shoulders. The relentless abuse continues day after day, his silent vow to kill the old man growing stronger with each insult. After a week of this torment, his body finally gives out and he collapses in the grass with a weary sigh. He lies there convinced he will die from exhaustion long before he ever gets near the woman of the estate. Yet even in his fatigue, he looks back with a determined glint in his glowing eyes. He stares up at the sky, knowing he must find some way to speak with her. His gaze idly follows the path of a single bird soaring above the trees. His quiet moment is interrupted as a white streak suddenly falls directly towards him. He jolts upright with a cry of disgust, wiping the fresh bird dropping from his face. With a bewildered expression, he glares up into the leaves to find the source. His eyes fix on a small parrot perched on a high branch. The bird simply tilts its head, chirping a phrase that sounds oddly like a command to go away. A dangerous smile spreads across his face as he raises a hand, crackling with energy. But the bird flies off just as he moves, leaving him to mutter about the meal it could have been. Deciding he'd rather not be a target again, he stands with an irritated frown. A sudden shout startles him as a small child comes running into the clearing. The boy runs right past him, reaching his hands up toward the escaping parrot. Clutching the bird to his chest, the child glares and yells for him not to hurt his pet. He points to his own cheek, indignantly telling the boy that the feathered creature struck first. The child proudly declares his name is Daniel, the bird now resting calmly on his head. The name stops him cold, and he stares at the boy with a sudden puzzling sense of familiarity. A sudden vivid vivid image of a baby's face flashes through his mind. The vision is broken by the bearded servant's panicked arrival, who recognizes him as the man from the hut. He stares back in utter confusion, the servant's words making no sense. The servant Randall then turns to scold the young master for wandering off alone. His rage immediately redirects to the farmhand, accusing him of slacking on the job. A new voice suddenly calls out Randall's name, interrupting the tirade. As another guard is told to escort the child home, the boy protests that he wants to stay with Jean. Randall kneels, gently telling the young master that they still have work to finish. Jean watches the exchange with a thoughtful smirk, contemplating if he should make a run for it now. The boy is led away but turns to look back at him one last time. Daniel then sticks his tongue out in a childish taunt before disappearing. An amused smirk plays on Jean's lips as he watches the little brat go. His expression falters as he feels a sudden sharp tug from behind. He is then violently pulled backward, completely caught by surprise. Randall has him by the shirt, screaming that he has caught him skipping work yet again. Much later that night, Jean lies collapsed in the dirt, cursing the cruel old man under his breath. He is completely spent, having been forced to do twice the normal amount of work. A sharp pang of hunger reminds him he has not even been allowed to eat dinner. He stares into the darkness, his body screaming with exhaustion. Yet with a surge of pure will, he slowly pushes himself up from the ground. His hand finds the hilt of a small knife, his hunger driving him toward a desperate act. But his exhaustion is too great, and he sinks to his knees on the wooden porch, unable to move. His mind can only focus on his singular goal, the image of that woman appearing before his eyes. That same woman sleeps peacefully in her lavish bedchamber. A sudden discomfort stirs her from her slumber. She sits up in the darkness, a lone figure in the vast, quiet room. A sharp pain makes her clutch her head, her face contorted in a silent cry. Her eyes open, filled with a weary and troubled expression. She looks down to see a strange thread of light touching her bare foot. She reaches down to grasp her foot, trying to soothe the strange sensation. The feeling passes, and she lets out a long, exhausted sigh. The next morning, Jean is back to his grueling labor, hauling wood across the estate grounds. He glances back over his shoulder, a flicker of movement catching his eye. Pausing his work, he watches the distant figure with a thoughtful frown. He recognizes her instantly as the woman from the estate, wandering alone in the dark. Crouched by his woodpile, he wonders what she could possibly be doing out so late. His eyes widen as he sees she is not alone. Another figure emerges from the shadows to meet her. He recognizes the man as Randall, and his mind races with suspicion. Sitting atop the woodpile, he watches them from afar, questioning what their meeting could mean. His simmering anger finds an outlet as his axe splits a log clean in two. He brings the axe down again and again, venting his frustration with every swing. His thoughts fixate on the strange sight of the lady walking around like a madwoman in the middle of the night. He pictures the servant's leering expression from the night before. The suspicion that something is terribly wrong fuels his next swing. His uncontrolled rage sends a shard of wood flying through the air. It strikes Randall squarely in the head, who erupts with furious accusations. Two other farmhands sigh, all too familiar with the constant arguing. Randall points a shaking finger, screaming that he must finish all the wood today. Jean doubles over his body, trembling with a rage he can barely contain. A dark thought takes root, forming a twisted, knowing smile on his lips. He splashes water on his face, the cold shock confirming his grim new theory. The memory of constant torment is broken by a voice calling out an unfamiliar name. A fellow worker claps a hand on his shoulder, urging him to come eat lunch. He glances over his shoulder, the alias Paul still feeling strange to him. He sits before a warm meal, remembering the fake name he gave a few days prior. He eats ravenously alongside the others, having finally let his guard down. One of the men laughs, remarking on how much his appetite has improved. They all share a good-natured laugh as they recall his stubborn feat in the olive orchard. He pauses with a piece of bread in his hand when they ask what he did before this. He gives a vague answer, letting them joke about his supposed success with women. An older woman tells him to just wait for the supervisor's temper to pass, but he knows better. He takes a drink as another man's comment about special wagons catches his attention. The man explains that the Bacardi Guild's biggest exports are wagons and carriages. He then expresses disbelief that Jean could have been working there without knowing that. Another worker stands up, his boots thudding on the ground as he prepares to lecture. He pauses for a moment, gathering his thoughts with a quiet hum. Then he points directly at Jean, amazed at his total ignorance. Jean simply asks what the Eastern trade route is, confirming he knows nothing. The man crosses his arms, still baffled that Paul is so uninformed. He explains that the route is the oldest and busiest trade path on the continent. It runs from the capital all the way to the Golden Sea, making a fortune for whoever controls it. The bearded worker adds that after the old master died, they all thought a man named Pontius would take over. But the older woman cuts in with a start, excitedly recalling how the lady of the estate held her ground. She clasps her hands, gushing about how the seemingly fragile woman became the guild's pillar. Jean listens intently, the idea of a woman leading a powerful trade guild catching his full attention. The first man man shakes his head, still unable to believe how little Jean knows. He continues the story explaining the root originally belonged to the Bellart family. The lady of the estate, he reveals, is the last surviving member of that noble house. The woman elaborates that her marriage to the master merged her family's claim into the Bicardi Guild. But the bearded man adds with a grimace that the other guilds resent her position and are stirring up trouble. The woman sighs, concluding this must be why their supervisor Randall has been so on edge lately. Jean's eyes narrow slightly as he asks why that is. The bearded man explains that Randall was the blacksmith for her family before she married a skilled man who followed her out of loyalty. Jean looks up the information, settling in his mind with a new and troubling weight. He stands alone, feeling a strange sense of unease about their long-standing connection. The memory of seeing them walking together at night now feels far more significant. He covers his mouth, a wicked thought taking shape about how he could use this information against them. A sudden sound cuts through his scheming, making his glowing eyes dart to the side. He sees the back of a small, fluffy dog, its owner calling out its name. The voice belongs to the young Master Daniel, who is playing fetch with his pet. With a cheerful cry, the boy winds up to throw a small stone for the dog. The stone lands right at Jean's feet, drawing the boy's attention to the man standing before him. Jean crosses his arms, staring down at the young master with an unreadable expression. Daniel looks up with a start, clutching his dog nervously as he realizes he has been caught. A dark and dangerous thought flashes through Jean's mind as he looks at the vulnerable child. Elsewhere on the estate grounds, a maid calls out frantically for the missing boy. She suddenly stops, her eyes wide with shock as she recognizes a familiar voice. With a panicked shout, she immediately starts running toward the sound. She finds Jean carrying a laughing Daniel on his shoulders, the dog trotting happily alongside them. The maid can only stand and stare, completely stunned by the impossible scene. Her silence is broken by a man's furious, booming voice. Inside the mansion, a stern-looking butler confronts Jean, enraged that a lowly farmhand would dare touch the young master. The butler's fury is met with an incredulous laugh from Jean. He turns to face the man, casually explaining that he was just keeping the lonely child company. With a dismissive gesture, he tells the butler not to be so uptight about him befriending the boy. He then asks with a confident smile what could possibly be wrong with them playing together. The butler can only sputter in disbelief at the farmhand's sheer audacity. Jean tilts his head back, a mocking glint in his eyes as he suggests he and the boy are equals. He then warns the stunned man not to get in his way for no good reason. His true plan flashes through his mind, beginning with winning over the little kid's heart. Through the son, he will finally be able to learn more about the enigmatic woman of the estate. A sly smile plays on his lips as he imagines uncovering all the secrets she must be hiding. His mind drifts back to the afternoon, recalling the boy's pure delight while riding on his shoulders. He remembers the feeling of the child's small hand gripping his own tightly. The boy's initial look of wide-eyed surprise was a precious sight. It had quickly melted into a laugh of pure, unadulterated joy. That night, the memory of their game brings a peaceful smile to the young master's face as he sleeps. He wakes the next morning, rubbing an eye and thinking about how much fun he had. Filled with a new purpose, he gets out of bed and eagerly makes his way out of his room. He finds the butler in the dining hall and immediately asks about his mother. His hopeful expression crumbles when he learns she has already left for guild business. In a fit of frustration, he shouts that he is not eating, complaining that his mother is always busy. He retreats to his room, collapsing face down on his bed and muttering that it is not fair. Lying there, he quietly wishes he could be someone who could actually help her. He thinks back to how lonely it has been ever since his father left for work far away. From the top of the grand staircase, he remembers watching his mother, realizing they have not shared a meal together even once. The boy drifts in a sad daze, the loneliness of the vast mansion weighing on him. But then a thought sparks and he leaps out of bed, determined to go outside and clear his head. Elsewhere, Jean is already hard at work, his back muscles straining with effort. He pushes against a heavy wooden press arm, his body slick with sweat under the morning sun. The farmhand then hauls a massive stone roller across the dusty ground, a picture of raw strength. From behind a nearby structure, Daniel peeks out, wondering if the man is alone. A hopeful blush warms his cheeks as he considers asking for another piggyback ride. He shakes his head, immediately telling himself he is not a child anymore. Just then, another worker calls out the name Paul, revealing that Jean is not by himself. Seeing that the man is busy with others, Daniel decides to run off. He stops short on a stone path when his eyes land on a large rake left in the grass. Picking it up, he wonders what this strange new object is as he drags it through the gardens. He looks up with a determined glint in his eyes, a new plan forming. With a grunt of effort, he tries to lift the heavy tool from the ground. He struggles to raise the rake high into the air, its weight almost too much for him. Straining with all his might, he vows that he will become really strong too. A sudden shout of "Hey!" makes Jean pause his work and turn in surprise. In his imagination, Daniel flexes impressive muscles and declares that he will help. He pictures himself beside the farmhand, proudly showing off his new strength. The fantasy fades, leaving a quiet quiet hope that maybe then he could be a little help to his mother. That quiet hope is shattered by a frantic shout as a maid begins calling for the young master. The butler's panicked voice joins hers echoing across the estate as he searches for the missing boy. He walks down a garden path, his search growing more desperate with every empty corner. A worried sweat beads on his brow as he quickens his pace, wondering where a boy who skipped breakfast could have run off to. He scans the horizon of a vast flower field, completely unaware that Daniel is hiding in the tall grass right below. The boy stifles a giggle with his hands, watching the oblivious butler from his hiding spot. After the man has gone, Daniel cautiously peeks his head up to see if the coast is clear. He lies back with a relieved sigh, deciding to stay hidden until he feels a little stronger. But a sudden rustling in the grass nearby makes him sit up with a curious tilt of his head. A large, scaly head suddenly pops up from the foliage, its appearance catching him by surprise. His blood runs cold as he realizes with dawning horror that he is face to face with a snake. For a brief second, its shimmering scales make him wonder if it could possibly be a nice one. That thought is instantly erased when it opens its mouth in a vicious hiss, revealing its fangs. The snake lunges, but a dark blade flashes down, pinning its head to the ground just before it strikes. A voice asks if he is okay, and Daniel looks up from the ground with wide, startled eyes. He sees Jean standing over him, casually asking what he is doing all the way out here. The farmhand gives him a knowing smirk, correctly guessing that Daniel was the one watching him work earlier. He then playfully scolds the boy for wandering off and risking another lecture from the butler. Flushed with embarrassment, Daniel can only let out a series of choked, incoherent sounds. The strange reaction makes Jean's smile fade into an expression of slight confusion. Instead of answering, Daniel suddenly grabs his leg, crying out from a sharp, surprising pain. His face flushes a deep red, utterly mortified to be seen in such a pathetic state. The wave of embarrassment is too much, and he breaks down into hiccuping sobs. Jean's expression softens with concern as he kneels, asking if the snake managed to bite him. He takes the boy's foot, quickly identifying the problem as a simple cramp and beginning to work it out. Daniel shouts as a jolt of pain shoots through his calf, but the feeling quickly gives way to confusion. His eyes widen in disbelief as he realizes the ache has completely vanished. Jean gives his ankle a final reassuring pat, telling him he knew how to fix it. He then gently ruffles the boy's hair, chiding him for crying over something so small. With the small crisis averted, Jean suggests it is time they head back to the mansion, but he stops, a questioning look on his face as the boy suddenly gasps. He turns to see Daniel pointing with newfound excitement towards something in the distance. The boy's finger is aimed at a small, quaint cottage nestled in a field of flowers. A thin trail of smoke rises from its chimney, signaling someone is home. Inside that very cottage, Jean now sits carefully peeling an orange for the young master. His eyes remain focused on his task, a thoughtful and unreadable expression on his face. Daniel watches him sitting patiently with a faint blush coloring his cheeks. He wonders to himself how he ended up here, having simply followed the farmhand without a second thought. Elsewhere, his mother receives the alarming news that her son is missing. The butler explains with a worried face that the boy has disappeared from his room again. He adds that the boy must be hungry by now, having not even eaten breakfast. The news makes her stop by her waiting carriage, her voice sharp with sudden concern. Her expression falters as the butler explains that Daniel hates eating his meals alone. She looks out at the vast estate, instructing her staff to please keep looking for him. With that, she turns away, her posture stiff as she prepares to depart. Instead of the orange, Daniel happily shovels spoonfuls of a warm meal into his mouth. Jean watches him eat, his own expression distant and unreadable. He remarks on how much the young master is eating, and Daniel explains it is because he skipped breakfast. When Jean asks why, the boy admits with full cheeks that he does not like eating alone. The farmhand's question about his mother is met with a sad sigh as Daniel says she is always busy. Jean's eyes narrow slightly, quietly processing this useful piece of information. He changes the subject, observing that the boy's usual animal companions are not with him. Daniel proudly declares that he needed to focus on his personal training today. With the meal finished, Jean stands up, announcing it is time for them to head back. He knows that being caught spending so much time with the child could jeopardize his plans. The boy looks up at him with a worried and pleading expression, not wanting to leave. He blurts out that he wants to be strong just like him, calling the farmhand Paul. Paul pauses, turning back to the boy to confirm if he truly wants to become strong. An interested glint appears in his eyes as he sees a new opportunity to exploit. He points to the bowl, slyly noting that Daniel has left all of his carrots. Daniel looks up with wide, hopeful eyes, waiting to hear the secret to strength. His face falls in utter dismay when Paul declares that he must eat his carrots. Paul leans in with a theatrical expression, taunting the boy about whether the task is too tough. Resigned to his fate, Daniel agrees to eat them, earning a satisfied smirk from the man. Paul then steps outside, telling the boy he will wait for him to finish every last bite. He leans against the cottage wall with a soft smile, thinking to himself that the boy is a cute kid. The thought stirs a distant memory of a woman's hand reaching out to him. He remembers remembers being led by her as a small child running to keep up as they approached a similar house. The memory fades, and he looks up thoughtfully, realizing Daniel must be about the same age he was then. Just then, Daniel emerges from the cottage and plops onto the grass, complaining about the awful taste of the carrots. In an attempt to lift his spirits, Paul tosses something else toward the pouting boy. Far from their quiet corner, the thin trail of smoke rising from the chimney has attracted attention. Daniel's mother looks up from the estate grounds, her gaze locking onto the smoke coming from the garden. With a surge of dread, she begins to run toward its source, shouting her son's name. Back inside the cottage, just moments before, Paul had been asking the boy to keep their time together a secret. He had explained with a dismissive air that no one would approve of the young master associating with a lowly worker. His eyes had narrowed with intensity, pressing to make sure Daniel understood. He had then softened his tone with a smile, asking the boy to simply take his side if they were discovered. Unaware of the pact being formed, the boy's mother rushes through the flower beds, closing in on the cottage. She finally reaches the small building, her heart pounding with worry. Her face appears in the window, her arrival going unnoticed for just a moment. Inside, Daniel is completely oblivious, proudly flexing a bicep he thinks has already gotten bigger. He lets out a peal of delighted laughter, giddy with his supposed new strength. The happy sound is cut short as his mother appears in the doorway, her expression frozen in disbelief. Paul turns from the door, his final reminder to keep their secret hanging in the air as Daniel stares past him in shock. His eyes dart sideways, the cool confidence on his face instantly vanishing. In the doorway stands the boy's mother, her figure casting a long, imposing shadow. Her face is a mask of cold fury, her gaze fixed on the two of them. Panic grips Paul as Daniel shrinks behind him, paralyzed by fear. The woman's voice is sharp and devoid of warmth as she orders Daniel to come to her. With a terrified whimper, the boy begins to tremble as he walks toward his mother. She turns abruptly, her hand firmly gripping his as she pulls him away. Daniel glances back with worried eyes, wondering what will happen to the farmhand. Behind them, Paul waves his arms, frantically trying to get a word in. The boy's eyes widen in sudden realization as a memory flashes through his mind. He remembers Paul's request to simply take his side if they were discovered. Bolstered by his promise, Daniel stops and blurts out that Paul saved him from a snake. He quickly adds that he was only resting in the cottage because he had a cramp in his leg. Paul watches from the doorway, a proud and relieved smirk spreading across his face. The boy finishes his impassioned defense by declaring that Paul is a good person. He even adds that the man made him soup, suddenly deciding he needs to get the proof. His mother looks down, her expression softening into one of slight confusion. Daniel then turns and runs back toward the cottage to fetch the snake's body, sending Paul into a new panic. Her patience finally wearing thin, the woman shouts for her son to stop running immediately. She hikes up her long skirt, preparing to chase after the disobedient child. But in her haste, her foot catches on a root and she lets out a startled cry. She stumbles forward, her face a mask of surprise and pain. Before she can hit the ground, a pair of arms suddenly wrap around her waist, catching her fall. Strong hands gently steady her, one on her arm and the other supporting her back. She looks up into Paul's concerned face as he asks if she is all right. Shoving him away, she commands him to stay back, stopping Daniel in his tracks. The boy immediately rushes to her side, grabbing her skirt and asking if she is okay. Paul kneels, pointing out that it looks like she has twisted her ankle in the fall. She glares down at him, her voice low and threatening as she warns him about getting involved with her son. A tense silence hangs in the air after her sharp words. She then grabs him by the collar, warning him that the consequences will be far worse than simply being fired. With a final forceful shove, she releases him. Taking Daniel's hand, she turns and begins to lead him away from the cottage without another word. They walk in silence through the garden archway, heading back toward the main house. The boy looks back, sadly realizing he is probably banned from leaving for a while. He glances at his mother's stern profile, thinking she must be truly furious this time. His face scrunches up in fear as he anticipates the lecture that is surely coming, but her voice is unexpectedly calm when she asks if he likes that worker so much. The quiet question makes him blush and he finds he cannot look up from his feet. He simply answers yes, his gaze still fixed on the ground. Her grip on his hand suddenly tightens, her silence speaking volumes. Later that evening, he lies tucked in bed as his maid gently chides him for the worry he caused. He flinches under the covers, recalling the severe lecture he received as soon as he got home. His own punishment forgotten, his thoughts turn to the farmhand as he asks if Paul is still at the mansion. The maid confirms that he is, her own expression shifting to one of concern as she asks why he wants to know. Daniel pauses for a moment, his eyes wide as he tries to think of a casual reply. He quickly dismisses her worry, insisting that he was just wondering. With a relieved smile, he wishes his maid a good night, reassured that Paul is safe. Elsewhere, Daniel's mother presides over a tense meeting regarding last month's supply losses. She reads the grim report detailing a raid near the eastern gate by a rival faction. One of the men at the table complains, loudly blaming the increased attacks on her new leadership. She listens to the thinly veiled criticism without a change in her stoic expression. Another council member feigns deep thought, murmuring to himself as he considers the situation. Her response is to place the report firmly down on the table. She then issues a clear and decisive order to double the guards on the eastern route. An older man immediately questions her, calling the decision unprecedented. He condescendingly suggests that her short tenure as guildmaster is the reason for her rashness. Another man quickly offers an alternate, less confrontational solution. She cuts him off mid-sentence, her voice firm, as she insists the route will remain the same. Moving a chess piece across the map, she explains that any sign of weakness will invite a larger attack. She slams the piece down with authority, her point made with resounding finality. Her gaze falls on the man who first questioned her, silencing any further dissent. She then assures the council that she will personally handle any consequences. Her attention shifts to the door as she calls for someone to come in. A man enters, announcing a message from the Pontius Guild, causing a murmur of surprise. He presents a formal letter with an unbroken wax seal on a silver tray. The message is a request for a personal meeting, an offer one of her men immediately finds absurd. With the letter now open before her, she considers the question hanging in the air. She reads that the Guildmaster of Pontius wishes to pay respects to her late husband, noting the timing is quite fitting. Elsewhere in the estate, a large bearded man noisily eats a meal in the staff kitchen. He muses to himself that he will soon be returning to his forge. Just then, another man in formal attire enters and asks if the new recruit's training is finished yet. He complains that the training has gone on for weeks when it should have only taken a few days. The large man dismisses the concern, stating that the recruit is a wild colt who needs to be broken. But the other man notes that the recruit does not seem as bad as he initially expected. He then reveals that he once saw the man give the young master a piggyback ride, sending the bearded man into a rage. The large man lunges across the table in fury, but his companion quickly grabs him, pleading for him to listen. He quickly adds that the young master was not harmed, which only slightly placates the fuming man. The formal man continues, explaining that he tried to scold and lecture the new recruit about his behavior. He recalls shouting at the man with all the sternness he could muster. Yet his words had no effect, as the recruit simply ignored the entire dressing down. The man then recounts how he was walking down a hall later that same afternoon. His walk was interrupted when he heard a noise and paused to investigate. Down the corridor, he saw young Daniel running with his arms spread wide in play. The boy was smiling more brightly than he had in a very long time. This came as a surprise, as he expected Daniel to be upset after his encounter with the troublesome recruit. The bearded man laments how withdrawn the boy has been, missing the point of the story entirely. The formal man sighs, concluding that Paul seems to have a surprising talent for winning people over. He even suggests Paul has likely charmed half the women on the estate already. He insists the man works harder than most and gets along with everyone without causing any trouble. The bearded man grabs his face in frustration, arguing that the recruit is just pretending until he can show his true colors. With a weary look, the formal man tells him to stop pestering Paul already. He then dismisses the other man with a suspicious glare, telling him to get back to his own job. The formal man turns his back, leaving the bearded man to stew alone at the kitchen table. Elsewhere, that same recruit gasps for air as he is held in a brutal chokehold during a training spar. Yet a wild grin spreads across Paul's face as his eyes begin to glow, taunting that he has not even started yet. Two onlookers shout for them to stop, insisting the fight has gone too far. The man holding him down ignores their pleas as Paul continues to struggle on the ground. Moments later, the fight is over with his opponent lying motionless on the dirt. Paul looks up from the ground, a smug smile on his face, as he asks how it feels to lose to a weakling. His gloating is cut short by a sudden powerful blow to the back of his head. The bearded man stands over him, roaring in fury at what he has just done. His voice echoes across the courtyard as he demands to know who would fight the guild's mercenaries within the lady's mansion. He then turns his rage on the other guards, threatening to claw back every coin they have earned for breaching their contract. Unfazed by the scolding, Paul calmly asks if it is true the lady is recruiting new guards. The bearded man turns back in shock as Paul explains he was simply testing the qualifications of the current hires. He continues with a sly smile, recalling how one of them had the nerve to call him a weakling. Leaning back with a triumphant look, he concludes that this is why loudmouths are always so laughable. The defeated mercenary seethes with rage as Paul asks if he would easily qualify for the job. The bearded man, sputtering with disbelief, demands to know why he would even want to join them. With a confident grin, Paul declares it is because he is obviously the stronger one. Their argument is suddenly interrupted by the sound of an approaching horse. It pulls a fine carriage that comes to a halt before the main entrance of the estate. The coachman holds the reins steady as two attendants wait to greet the passenger. One of the men offers a hand, welcoming the madam as she steps down from her seat. The visitor is a tall, imposing woman dressed in an elegant purple gown, her expression severe. Her sharp eyes narrow slightly as a commotion from the courtyard reaches her ears. She wonders aloud what on earth could be causing such a disturbance. Back in the the courtyard, a faint smirk plays on Paul's lips. He stands confidently before the stunned guards, completely unbothered by the trouble he has caused. Thanks for watching. Bye.